My opening statement is that form is temporary, class is permanent. And injury is temporary and class is permanent. Marcus Bontempelli, we talk about the most impactful players in the competition, and when he got injured, we thought that it was going to be a real headache for the Bulldogs. They've done remarkably well. I don't think they could have started the season any better than they have, and to see him jump back into the game without missing a beat was exceptional. 30 touches, a couple of goals, clearances, centre bounce clearances, inside 50s, aerial ability. The snap that he had from 48, I reckon it was, it hit the post. There's probably 2 or 3 players in the comp that could find the footwork, the metre or two space in that quicker time, lay it across the boot and get that sort of power and purchase on it. That would have been a remarkable goal. The kick into Norton, after Norton had hit the post, that next kick in was just like in a moment to be able to sum it up and to be able to see the spatial awareness and be able to finish it. The time and space that he finds, the genuine toughness that he carries in the game, and he only played 71%. So, and they found a few to put around him, which is going to be interesting. But I mean, Nick Dacos is up there. Obviously, Sam Darcy and his injury is really bad news and was tragic to see in many ways in a professional sense. Toby Green's up and about. Zach Merritt's playing well. Lachie Neale's bouncing around. Libba's in really good form, but Bont comes in and just goes bang and just still looks like the class player in the competition, which is amazing to do off 70% of one game.
So the champ is here?
I think so. He's universally respected too, and I think that might be a Bulldogs thing. Bulldogs haven't really, I don't know, they're not confronting. I don't think very many opposition supporters have a negative opinion of the Bulldogs as a club. I think they're generally really well respected. They've made the most of what they get, and I think Bont is always, just the way he carries himself is exceptional. He's a deep thinker. He's prepared to open up and share of himself. He's a really strong leader, and he's got better as he's gone along. So just in that short space of time, I was just compelled to make him my buck stops because, I just think he is the absolute class player in the competition at the top of his game.
The champ is here. The big issue is all of what happened yesterday. How did you find it?
Yeah, I actually had time on Monday after a really busy 3 or 4 days just to sit at home. Went for a run, whatever, got set and had space just to sit, enjoy the lead in on Fox and actually sit and watch the game from the beginning. And it was, it's the way that I remember Easter Monday games. Both teams are thereabouts now. They were both in the Seedings last week.
They were.
Looking down, round 5. Hawthorn was seeded 2 and Geelong was seeded 3 for me. And I think we got the game we expected. I thought the use of Dangerfield was instructive. On what they want him to be and not blinking when they could have. They trusted their midfield mix. They thought Atkins was doing a good job. They wanted to keep the run in there with Bailey and Holmes. They had it set up the way they wanted. And Geelong have never really been too concerned about losing clearance because they feel like they want to control the transition elements of the game. And Atkins is in good form, which means that Dangerfield doesn't need to be the bloke that goes in there to be the hard, tough player. So him staying forward and impacting late was a win for the coaches. I was really surprised that Hawthorn allowed themselves to get drawn away from the middle of the ground when Geelong had the ball in their back half. Like the Geelong's forwards lengthened away, the same way that GWS forwards lengthened against them down in Tassie. Hawthorn made the adjustment and popped. They're man-on-man, but they popped front and they controlled the corridor. But they fell into that again and they allowed Geelong to move the ball through the midfield a little bit easier than they might have thought. I think there's more upside in Geelong than Hawthorn. Mm-hmm. Geelong had Manor, 15 games, Humphrey 16, Nevitt 15, O'Sullivan, who was exposed as a fullback with Henry and Kolodjasny not there. And he won't lose, though. He won't be in that position. I think they discovered he's not ready to play as the deepest defender, but he lost 2 contests that cost 2 goals that Geelong won't ask that player to play there for another period of time, even if they had the same personnel availability. Closey 6, Dempsey 38. So there's 6 players with 5 with less than 20 games. But they were able to stand up in big moments, and they got enough right to get the win. The skill level of both sides was a little bit down on normal, but Geelong did more right than Hawthorn did.
Hawthorn's kicking, which usually their piercing weapon, just sabotaged them time and again. It was really strange.
Geelong. Yeah, look, it was on Hawthorn. It definitely was on Hawthorn. But the conditions are going to be different. Like, so if you're expecting to go through winter and kick, and you rely on your kicking to be able to win games of football, and I don't think Hawthorn have relied on their kicking as such in some of their wins in the first sort of 5 weeks of the year. They've actually, they've won the games with grit. They've won them with toughness. They've won it with leadership and awareness in key moments. I don't think they're as reliant on their kicking as we say they are. I mean, they're a very highly skilled side. I think it's their run and carry and their ability to split 2v1s in key parts of the ground to be able to keep the ball moving forward. And they weren't able to do that quite as well. So that's another skill efficiency. They're not standing up in tackles quite as well to get the ball to the next player. So kicking, handballing, knock-ons, whatever you want to say, moving the ball from one of them to the next one, not quite as efficient, not quite as clean as we've come to know in the last 6 or 7 months. And the other one for me is Sicily. Like, there's been discussion around Sicily's use, and I think it doesn't matter how good you are, if you're thrown consistently from forward to back. Adam Hunter back in the day, bless his soul, was a player that would grow doing both roles, and he wanted to be the guy who decided games at different times. And John Worsfold used him in that role. We're seeing it with McCartan, and we're seeing it a little bit with Sicily. He is a break glass in case of emergency forward, because. And Hawthorn have had to go to it because they've been in tight situations where they feel like they've needed more in front of the ball. I think Charles had a really good beginning to the year, but Hawthorn's query is going to be, is Kaushadea going to be enough to give you a little bit more aerial presence? Because he's a Logan Morris type size, even though he's probably got an inch or two on Logan Morris, but Logan Morris is trying to do that in Joe Danaher's stead at the moment. But yeah, I think they'll bed Sicily down in the back and hopefully play well enough that they don't need to throw him forward and be able to get their smalls into the game and kick winning scores and be 4 or 5 goals clear and not have to put Sicily forward. But they have found themselves in situations where the game needs to be won, and there's no reason why you wouldn't go to him, because he usually does it. But he dropped 2 or 3 yesterday they'd normally take, and it might have been the difference.
Yeah, he had good looks. There were a couple of times as the ball that he was leading across, and he just got caught halfway between whether he was going to chest mark it, and he ended up just flat-handing it. 99 times out of 100, he's marking that ball. So I reckon he had 4 99 out of 100 moments in the game that he usually delivers against.
And he will be absolutely kicking himself on that. And because he's a high achiever. He has high expectations. The reason why he's worn his heart on his sleeve across his career, and he's been a firecracker in that regard. He can lose it at times. It is because he cares. It's because he wants to be impactful, because he wants to be the one that wins it. He would have gone to bed last night and woke up this morning thinking, and even the shot at goal, he would normally lace that. Like, no matter what the conditions are, he would normally find a way to get that through the big sticks and complete and seize the moment and finish. Just the same way as you would have thought he would have done it in the semi-final. He will be kicking himself about that. And that is why he's such a good player. That's why he's such an impactful player, and it's why he's the leader. And it's why he'll back up. He won't stay in this space. He'll do the work and he'll come back, and his class will rise to the top. And you're going to have games like that periodically. And you can't underestimate the breeze as well. I mean, the people watching on TV, and you were there calling it live, you would have seen some things like that's bizarre. Like, even Tom Stewart running under that ball, that had to be a little bit about breeze because I haven't seen him do that in his whole career. So there are conditions that are taking place out there, and when the wind gets going in the G, it can be a really tough place to read the drop of the ball.
Nash's incident that left Brian Myers with concussion. He was with us on 360 last night. So how does this run out in your mind, Nathan Buckley?
Yeah, you instantly think, what was he thinking there? There was no doubt it was. I don't think it was deliberate. He wasn't intending to do that. I've never seen Connor Nash react in that aggressive manner. So I think he was trying to. The ball was right there, and Myers pulled it down as the swinging arm came through. But it was agricultural. There's no doubt, and it affected a lot of damage. Myers was totally out, even when they were trying to carry him off late. He couldn't get his legs underneath him. So it's not. It's in the same ballpark as Patrick Voss's and then Scrimshaw on Ridley. I don't think that's that much different. It looked like the impact was slightly, higher, but I don't know. I think the others were graded pretty high as well. So I don't know if the grading could be exercised any higher. But yeah, dealing, I suppose, from Sam Mitchell's perspective, they're dealing with a player who has quite obviously had something. Even Bailey Smith, who has actioned something that they're not proud of or that they have to psychologically get the other side of. That's it. That is a challenge, and it can knock a player around, and it can have an impact on a team performance. So Bailey Smith handled it well. I didn't really notice Connor Nash as much after that, but that's a very real challenge for the game as it stands on the day. But yeah, Myers was a big loss for Geelong on the day as well.
It feels like this falls to North Melbourne and Alistair Clarkson after a diabolical performance on Good Friday.
Yeah, and Carlton were better. Like, obviously, the West Coast game was open, and they were able to handle the transition and the open spaces of the midfield, and their ball use looked good. But this was a different game. This was in tight. They just ground North Melbourne out. They were harder and tougher. And then North Melbourne eventually couldn't go any further. Their back half, North back half, and their ability to defend their back 50 has been problematic for the longest time. And they've recruited some experience into there in Core and Logue. They haven't had access to Logue for a lot of that. Comben, they found a player who could impact aerially, but the three of them together are losing too many contests. You have to win a positional contest and then maybe win a body contest and then to go and eventually win the ball. The positional contests, North Melbourne defenders just keep losing it. Luke McDonald, who played as a key defender for a lot of time in the last couple of years, seems lost, and the ball just comes down too quick. It just comes down too quick. Their forward line puts the least amount of pressure on than any team in the competition. You see Richmond are playing with effort, and West Coast, they're less than West Coast. Statistically, they're not stacking up. The total pressure points, and Paul Curtis is nearly a top 10 player in that factor in the front half. So it's him and then no one. And you have a look at all of the best teams at the moment have got small forwards in number, 4 or 5 of them that will go and get the job done. Curtis is one out and he's hitting the scoreboard. And then the next guy's at McKercher, who can't or won't because he's still learning, young fella. Sheasel, who's been used in different roles, who is a ball winner first, not necessarily a pressure player. Maybe Phillips and Powell have got that grunt to be able to go and put pressure on, but they've been utilised in the midfield, and rightly so, I think. Zurhaar picks and chooses. Larkey, once the ball hits the ground, is a non-competitor, and that doesn't mean that doesn't have utility, but and Darling's not dissimilar. So we've sort of the mix. We saw Melbourne's game, and we'll get to Melbourne, pop their offense, but Tom McDonald and the coach spoke about the fact that we needed to get our pressure on and get our defence right, and that was what we did really well. Everyone else says, finally their offense has fallen into place. Well, you got to get your defence right for your offense to pop. It's pretty well so easily explained. If North Melbourne don't put pressure on the opposition, they can't get the ball back in damaging spots. They can't go and attack. They're just not defending. They're not competing. And if you're Clarko, you've got so many things to look at to try and fix, but you just need energy and effort from your players, put them in better shape as best as you possibly can, and put some, you got to get some grunt in that front half to put some pressure on, even if they're not a finishing player. Like Riley West has become a finishing player, but he started with grunt and pressure on, winning contests in the air and on the ground, and they don't have enough of those players in the front half.
So systematically, I think that there was an element of long-term downtrodden teams have a short breaking point. I felt that that's what happened, and there was a concession factor on Friday. It was too hard. But they have no real mechanism to stopping momentum, which is part of the reason they concede 100 points every time they play, is what are they actually going to when the game turns against them? That's what I struggle to see from the broadcast box, is how are they set up to stop this 4-goal run becoming an 8-goal run?
I think modern footy doesn't allow, there's a way to play to win now. And Clarko's gone through that process where he has schooled a young group of players with some experience in there in Hawthorn through a losing period, but playing a certain way, and it was a different way. I reckon it would be really difficult. I find it really difficult. Where's the game going to be in 5 or 6 years? I don't think it'd be far removed from where it is now. You need bounce off the back. You need a group of small forwards who can get up the ground and defend, but then get forward and put pressure on and finish when they get their chances. So if you don't have that, how do you play not just the modern game, but how do you play a brand that you think is going to be successful in 5 or 6 years and salute, as Clarko would say? They could do better by just flooding their back 50, and probably like Richmond are doing at the moment, the way Damien Hardwick described Richmond's footy. We know they want to get back in number and then rebound, and that might be an aspect of what the modern, what the game's going to look like in 5 years. But North aren't doing that. But that's been tried and true. Just get more numbers behind the ball so you can help a struggling back six defend with numbers, with congestion, and then just find out what an offense that works off the back of that. That's probably the answer. It goes away from what you're trying to coach with equal numbers in front of the ball and being able to score and being able to move the ball, which has been North ball. We were talking about a little bit about that expansive offense, but you probably have to come off that now to support a back six that can't defend because the front six can't put enough pressure on.
Yep. So it's alteration time.
Well, I think so. I mean, I just think about Terry Wallace. Was it Richmond playing Essendon, I think, and they decided that they would just get everyone behind the ball and then kick it around and try and play keepings off as much as they possibly could. Change the rules of the game. Change the way that the game was going to be decided. Don't let it be played anywhere near the opposition's terms and play it on ours and pick something new. It'd be pretty courageous to do that at this point, and it might even be detrimental to the development of the young players that are there. So you've got to weigh that up. But how important is winning now? I don't think that you're neither winning now nor developing well at the moment. So pick one and then go do that.
All right, the pressure index is on North Melbourne and Alistair Clarkson. PFI, preliminary final integrity, you were there for Collingwood. Was this the best performance of the season so far?
Yeah, and I think that it's unpacking Brisbane with their defensive structures and pressure just showed what they'd been building for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So Darcy Moore's form's been getting better. Their win against the Bulldogs on the G probably – there's a bit more merit in that now when you see what the Bulldogs have been able to do in the 2 or 3 weeks since. Brisbane have been able to kick mark around Team D's. They've added that element where they can run and carry and dash through you. And they've always had the long down the line and then speed up off that. So there's three. Brisbane get the ball in the defensive mid, and there's been 3 different ways that they can beat you, and they've utilised all of that to effect. So Collingwood's challenge was going to be to break that down, and they broke it down. Brisbane got to halfway through the third quarter or early in the third quarter, and they were only a couple of goals down, and they started trying to plug the ball through the middle because Collingwood would not give them the centre corridor. And when you go wide against Collingwood and they turn the ball over, their run and carry and their ability to corridor wrap back to their numbers that just stopped you from going through the middle, and they go and access the bodies that are there. That means that they force you to play wide, they come back through the middle, and then they've got the ball in the front half of the centre square and you've got the whole 50 to go to. And they've got a damaging front six. So I think they've been exceptional. They're going to be very hard to move the ball through. And, any offence is going to get its best test against Collingwood's defence in the next month or so.
So systematically, is this, we run PFI, is this the sort of thing that will be ultimately successful and drive you to that penultimate weekend of the season?
I would not be surprised. We look at the offense and we look at run and dash from the back, and we look, you got to be hard and tough inside, harder and cleaner than your opposition. But yes, ultimately, my philosophy as a coach, if you need to be able to defend the ground, you need to be able to prevent the opposition from getting it in their scoring zone as much as you possibly can. So reducing inside 50s is one thing, which is a watch on the Giants because they're giving up 57 a game at the moment. We'll get to our seedings. But I think Collingwood's ability to defend and work as a team to impose that brand on their opposition is probably the biggest question that any team will be asked at the moment. Bigger than Geelong's transition game, bigger than Brisbane's scoring ability off the back of 15, 20 minutes, bigger than Hawthorn's spread and run and carry. Collingwood's zone defence and their efficiency of the same and their experience to be able to do it in any conditions. Well, when this will be tested, but it looks like they're going to be able to reproduce this. That is the biggest test in the game at the moment. And if you've got a one wood like that, it means that you can control the game and set the game up the way that you want it to be set up. That's pretty powerful.
They've reframed the age debate, haven't they? It allows them to play a really sophisticated brand of football given the experience that they've got across the field.
Yeah, I am amazed still and constantly of what Pendles is able to do, what Steele is doing, and what even Jeremy Howe, who's not at his physical optimum and won't be, but he still defends really well. He still sets up really well. Darcy Moore has popped off the back of that. Josh Dacos can play off his front foot rather than his back foot. That makes a big difference. They've lost players. They've been able to bring players into a system, plug and play, next man up. Ned Long looks like he makes them better, which is interesting, which means De Goey now goes and plays like Dangerfield or Petrarca rather than as a midfielder. And he won't like that as much because he loves his midfield time, but he's probably more impactful and effective there. But it all comes about because of, and we've seen this, North Melbourne and West Coast have a dearth of on-field leadership, and they don't have enough people to lasso the players back into a visible, constructive unit. Collingwood have got a surplus of them, of players that are prepared to voice and communicate, and that comes back to really good coaching, but it comes back to the guys that are owning the locker room. They're owning the way you prepare, they're owning the way you train, and they're owning the way that you play out in the field. And there's nothing that's walked past. There's no behaviours or standards that are walked past and not checked or challenged or reinforced in a positive manner. And that's on-field leadership. And, they're in good shape because of that.
Simon Goodwin got an awful lot right from selection to strategy, and Melbourne played like we've been waiting for them to play, like he's been waiting for them to play. Nathan Buckley, what did he get right?
A lot. I think selection's the first point. Bailey Fish is a very talented player, but he might have been, and one game does not make it so, but he might have been part of the reason. An offensive player who doesn't put a lot of pressure on the opposition when it hits the ground in that front half, and might have been picking and choosing with his work rate. We've shown elements of that. We've seen elements of it. So to make that call and let go a player who can take a game away from the opposition in 10 or 15 minutes at his best, but you've got to be looking at lower level as much as you look at top level. So that call was courageous in some sense. Van Rooyen to bring Turner in to go behind the ball to put Petty forward when he just said we're lacking height behind the ball, but he still needed to have that presence in front of the ball, and Petty played that role and played it well. And then Tholstrup's a good young player, and Henderson's still going to get there. But, to make those three changes, they all worked really well. Fullerton goes in to be this second ruck or to try and give some form of contest in front of the ball, and he may or may not be the answer, but you just needed a plug and play in some sense. But their pressure, they went from a bottom four pressure side through the first part of the year. Their performance on the weekend had them in the top four for the round. They had 22 inside. When Pickett kicked his third goal 10 minutes into the second quarter, there's 40 minutes of play. They'd had 22 inside 50s, which is a lot in 40 minutes, but they'd kicked 10 goals from those 22 entries. Now, to get 10 goals prior to that, it took 3 hours and 78 inside 50s. So that was a fair turnaround.
Yep.
Like that's not like just ratcheting it up a little bit. That's a contrast. That is night and day, black and white difference. So I've got no doubt the energy of the players. It was a backs against the wall performance. The energy of the players was that right. If we're going to go down here, we're going to go down committing to A, B, and C. And it would have been pressure on ball, share the ball, like use that extra handball or use that extra kick before we go inside 50. And the coach would have said, well, if we're going to go down, we're going to go. I'm doubling down, and he has doubled down, and he did double down, and he spoke really strongly about his own ability to connect with his players, and the evidence wasn't there. We've seen 4 quarters of evidence, and they could have lost that game because Freo came back late. They could have lost that game, but they were pot committed, and they found a way. Their leadership found a way in the last 10 minutes to be able to get them over the line. So they get the improved performance and the 4 points. And now they get their season looks very different, doesn't it? And the ladder, like everyone's top 8's back on, back up for grabs now. Oh my God! Like everyone's top 8 is back on the cards. You would have thought 2 weeks ago, nah, I've got a couple wrong. But now it looks like anything's possible. And Melbourne play Richmond in the Anzac Day Eve game on in a couple of days, and that's not one. It's going to take some winning by both teams, but you're back in the hunt.
How good was Cozzy Pickett?
Yeah, he was brilliant. Yeah, you sort of realise that you sort of miss a player like that, and you have players on your list that give you assets and a capability that no one else can have. Like if Cozzy Pickett's not there, and like you've got another young sort of pressure player that goes in, like Sharp, like Spargo, like Chandler, like they're not going to give you that top end finish that a Pickett can when he's on song. And if he gets enough supply at the right pace in the right doses, he can do a lot of damage. And he's still been developing as a player as he's gone along, and now he's shown that that's absolutely his top end. That's what he's capable of. If you could produce that once a month, you're going to be a real headache to the opposition. And now it's just a matter of producing a 7 out of 10 performance more consistently for him, and that's a little bit about what happens around him as much about what he brings to the table.
They got that right, Melbourne. They got that wrong. The umps can't measure distance.
Yeah, well, that's
77 metre, 50 metre penalty.
Yeah, and
15 is a huge challenge.
Well, in the end, with the 15, I think the 15, it's time just to make it 20. Okay, just make it 20, because you quite clearly want the game to keep moving, and I think coaches would work around that. And I think with the dinky little ones that take, don't really shift the defence, but you're generally getting counted down, and it's time to dispose of the ball, and you just hit that one that's 14 metres or 16 metres. Make it 20. We still won't get that perfect, but I think let's say, be honest we want to keep the game in motion. We don't want you to be able to control with a kick mark game as much as you have in the past. Just make it 20. I think the handover from the one ump to the other is the thing that caused the 77, because the second umpire stood where he thought it would be or should be. I think the umpire the umpire that gives the 50 at the point of play should orientate himself with where he is on the field and have a point that he's going to run to, and then he can do it. And you can worry about your zones and everything later.
Yeah, that was genuinely ridiculous. What about...
Before we leave that one, I've got a suggestion.
Go on. There's any aid to help?
There should be a uniform grid that goes onto any ground. And you're not going to do it with lines. We don't need any more lines. But I'm pretty sure that we can make sure that the groundskeeper has the same or a similar width mower. Just mow the strips so that in 7.5 metre strips, or 10 metre strips, so that you've got to cover either two of those to get the mark. It just anything that can help the umpires make a more correct call. They're not going to get it right 100% of the time. We don't expect that. But something that will aid the umpires and the players to be able to know what's going to be called a mark, what's going to be called play on. We would forget about it. We won't be looking at that except when there's one that's been paid that's too short or one that hasn't been paid that's too long. But I think there's ways and means that we can actually get this improved.
Yeah. The stray one is fine, as we can all live with the stray one.
Yeah.
That is just such a sensible idea. The Sam Darcy injury, the pall it cast over the game, it's the best possible result. It's still a long-term out and knee surgery and a little bit unclear what's going to happen. But we all felt that, didn't we?
Yeah, well, and the scenes in the room for me, I've had a little bit to do with Luke and Beck Darcy, and to see Sam's brothers and sisters in tears after it, like it was big from the competition viewpoint and what he has become, and for the Bulldogs and for the comp. But then when you come back to the family level, and you see how upset his loved ones were for him, that's when it really hits home. But young fellow who's got the world at his feet from a professional viewpoint, but he's also a great young man. But yes, that did send shockwaves through, didn't it? And the fact that he's escaped with the ACL, it says a little bit to some hyper flexibility, does it not? But he's dodged a bullet in that regard. But yeah, what the damage is, I don't think they'll be aware of until they go in. But you can deal with that, and it's his long-term health and football is what needs to be considered from the professional aspect.
All right, so that was the worst bit. Our debate centres on Noah Balta, and this is just coming to fruition now. So Amber Johnston is Channel 9's court reporter. Richmond player Noah Balta has been spared jail after his assault on a man at a pub in Mulwala. He was sentenced to a community correction order, which includes a night curfew for 3 months. His lawyer raised concerns about his playing schedule, but the magistrate said, too bad. So it's a curfew that lasts until July 22. So no night football for Noah Balta.
Which counts out Thursday night. Is it if it's effective immediately, then he won't play against Melbourne in the Anzac Day Eve game. And so the magistrate said, too bad. You've got to be at home. All right. And then looking forward, there's only one other night game for Richmond, which is against Essendon on May 23rd in round 11, before we get to where the schedule isn't specified, which is round 16 onwards. So the schedule hasn't been put in place in that. So that would be 2 of the next 8 games that Noah Balta wouldn't be available for, if that is actually a fact.
Yes. So Amber Johnston is sat in court. So he's under curfew from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. until July 22. Will not be able to play night games. So I probably had one of the mildest views on this, as I fully understand double jeopardy and the challenge of imposing a penalty and then to reassess it. So, but if I put that aside, and this is where the debate is, this has been dreadfully mishandled in football circles, and this is why. The last thing you want before a man goes and fronts a magistrate for sentencing is the premier of that man's state on a couple of occasions, just reaffirming how grave this is. And that's what football opened up here. It couldn't see the wood for the trees. Instead of realising small football issue, which can be easily circumvented by just waiting a couple of weeks and playing VFL, make it this huge societal referendum, but you're going back to front a magistrate. You do not want the backdrop of that being serious figures in the community going, hey, this is grave. I reckon football played a really bad hand here. Separate to the issues, as I say, my view has always been really mild, really short-sighted. The double jeopardy issue was real, but just to keep your powder dry for 2 more weeks until the sentencing was done and not make it a societal referendum.
I understand that. I wondered whether there was elements of his defence saying that he should play because if you don't, then this could be dragged out further and we can bring it to a head if you by actually playing when you are allowed to play through the AFL and through Richmond. I understand absolutely what you're saying, and I think in the end, I think the support of Noah as an individual, knowing that he's done wrong over here and that he's going to cop his whack, whatever that is, and that's a little clearer to us now, that they're supporting him to say, well, now you've paid your penalty from an AFL perspective. You are going to learn your fate from a criminal perspective. We support you and we want to give you the opportunity to play the game. But as it stands now, the fact that he's going to miss a couple of games, given what has been handed down, and I think that's the first point of call. Whatever the law suggests that he is, that he needs to pay his dues and to pay as penance, that's absolutely first, second, and third priority. It's still grey, isn't it? It has been grey the last couple of weeks. I would have thought that they were okay making that call. But if he's going to miss games coming forward now and that the penalty actually has landed and your suggestion is it could be worse than it might have been otherwise because it was put on
because it became a real big society issue as how we were going to treat it. I just think couldn't see the wood for the trees and that the issue of double jeopardy was very real, and I've been super mild on this but it allowed it to spin off into a really big community debate. And I just wonder whether that hasn't played out now in court.
So your assumption?
No, I'm not making any assumptions. I'm just saying
could have.
It's the possibility. The backdrop to it is very real. The Premier of this man's state has been reasserting how serious this is as a magistrate is contemplating what the sentence is going to be. You don't want that. That's not the scenario.
And does is it the magistrates? Is it not the magistrate's job to stay separate of any information or opinion that's out there?
And I'm sure they have, but the gravity of the scenario built and built and built. You don't want that. I think that's, and this is a slightly odd penalty, sentencing. It was just couldn't see the wood for the trees.
Point being made here. What does a curfew mean? Stay at home. If so, travel for away games would be out too, which is a fair point.
Yep, it would be. What do you want to do with your seedings, Nathan Buckley?
I'm going to go from bottom up.
Yep.
So I've got Hawthorn at 4, and they haven't been out of the top 4 for my time, but they've ranged from 4th to 1st, back to 4th. I've got Brisbane at 3rd, and they've been either 1 or 2 until now, so I've got them at 3. I've got Geelong at 2, and they've been in there for 4 of the 6 weeks, but this is the highest that I've had them. And I've got Collingwood, who haven't been in there yet, at 1. And you're always harder on your kids, so I've loved what I've seen of them, and obviously after the round 0 performance, it's been a way back to earn, I suppose, the trust, and they've definitely done that. They're in great shape.
All right, so Brisbane dropped from 1 to 3, Hawthorn from 2 to 4, Cats rise from 3 to 2, and Collingwood's first appearance is straight to 1. So we're along the same lines. Might have a play-in game. I might have the winner of the Bulldogs and the Giants go in next week if someone makes a mess of something. So
they're not in now.
No, they're not in now. I've got Geelong at 4 and Hawthorn at 3, which is a little counterintuitive given that Hawthorn beat Geelong yesterday. Mm-hmm. But I still think that just looking across the 6 weeks, I'm more comfortable having them in that order.
Mm-hmm.
I have dropped Brisbane to 2, and I put Collingwood straight to 1 as well. It was the most compelling performance of the year so far. It wasn't a 1-week wonder. It had been a build, and they got marked back because of the opening round performance against the Giants. So they were further back than they were going to be, and it's taken them a long time to recoup that ground. But they've done it in such a way they are on top of the ladder. Although you rightly point out, if the ladder was match ratio, the Gold Coast would still be there. But
I think my question was if they were playing this week, who would I think would win that game? And I think Collingwood would be the hardest to beat at the moment, right now in the form that they're in. So that's how I've got to that. And I think who would be the best chance of beating him? I'd actually think that Geelong, not necessarily with their personnel, but with their game style, would challenge Collingwood the most. And then Brisbane Hawthorn, I think, deserve to be around there. I love what the Bulldogs are doing. I really want to get them in, and with what's happened with Darcy, but then Bont and Pelly coming back, I think they've done exceptionally well. And GWS are thereabouts. So they play each other, which I'm looking forward to.
That Collingwood Geelong game's only a couple of weeks away as well. So you'll have that soon enough.